Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Corey Hayes. Coach Hayes owns and operates Hayes Training Systems in Prestonburg, Kentucky. They specialize in strength and conditioning, powerlifting, and student athlete training. Hayes has a 10,000 square foot training facility where it's not uncommon to work with 150 athletes a day. Before opening his gym, Coach Hayes was an accomplished powerlifter whose best lifts are a 725 squat, a 425 bench press, and a 680 deadlift with an 1825 total at 220. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you for having me.
So just reading through that bio, I mean, obviously you're in the private sector, but to run 150 private kids through a day is incredible. How are you able to build up that kind of clientele?
Just over time, and I've got a massive benefit most people don't have, and that's I have no competition. We're in Eastern Kentucky, so this is like a foreign language around here. Like, the closest even like personal training gym where they train like just adults and everything is probably 30 minutes away. So as far as sports training goes, you've got the high school stuff, just football teams lift and everything, but there's probably nobody within 2 or 3 hours of me. So I pull from the entire region that we're in. I've got kids. I mean, kids in my region driving an hour, hour and a half, and then I just got a message the other day from a girl 2.5 hours away. So I guess there's just I don't want to say I'm that good. I'm just there's nobody else.
Well, I would think there has to be some skill involved also if a kid's willing to drive 2.5 hours away.
Maybe.
You were an accomplished powerlifter. You worked with, you lifted with Brandon Lilly. You worked with Juggernaut a little bit, and then you moved into the athletic development. What
Mhm.
caused that crossover, and which do you enjoy better?
Really, I was just burnt out on powerlifting. Um, to be a powerlifter is to know one, and we're just all crazy. And like there's more to it when it comes to powerlifting. You're a therapist day to day if you're training people online. And it wasn't as fun. Um, the kids are just, they have less baggage coming in every day. They just want to be better. So I don't know. It fills my cup up a lot more. Put it that way.
I think I can relate to that. When I started this, I was looking for some workout partners, and some high school kids came. But the more high school kids that come and you see how you're able to help them in their lives, that becomes way more fulfilling than what I can squat.
Oh yeah. Like the life lessons that we get to teach, and just being able to, like link certain kids up that need to be together, like just build an environment and an ecosystem has just gave me a lot more enjoyment, honestly. Um, I 10 to 1 rather go watch high school basketball game with 5 of my kids playing versus going to a powerlifting meet and it's a bunch of big, sweaty, smelly dudes. It's just more enjoyable for me.
The one thing with powerlifting is it does open your eyes up to all of the different systems out there and what you can do to create strength. And then
Yep.
now working with athletes, you get to adapt everything you learned in that life and put it in
Yep.
this life. So extrapolating all of the best methods from all the different systems that you've seen or read about, how much of a work is that? And I'm sure it's always changing, but how much time do you have in that alone?
Dude, well, I growing up in powerlifting, I started when I was like 15 and I was a runt. So I figured out early like I had to get better than everybody else with my brain more so than my body. So I just became a student of the game. I used to actually I would get in trouble in school all the time. I would that was back when you could get free information offline, like good information. Um, I would get routines and I would break them down into like the actual backbones of each type of program. I categorize it, there's this coach is putting this lift in and it's filling this box, this box, this box, and I could kind of figure out over the weeks of the programming how they were waving it, why they were putting things where, how much of what, you know. So essentially I learned, multiple different languages. You could put a program down in front of me and I could tell you who wrote it without a name on it, just because I studied them so much. So doing that, and then I had the benefit of training with the best of the world almost every weekend. You know, whether it was Brian Siders, old IPF world champion. We went to West Side a lot. Brandon Lilly was my training partner for a long time. Getting to train with Dave Hoff and those kind of guys. We were just around it all the time, so we absorbed. I just tried to absorb everything. I'm more of somebody that's going to sit back and watch than ask, because what people say is not even in their own brains. They're telling you the truth, but it doesn't interpret the same as what they're actually doing a lot of times. So I just sit back and watch. I love to learn from other people's mistakes. So I see what they're doing, see the result. I see what this guy's doing, see the result. I see how this guy tweaks it and see the result. And just decades of that. And um, and it really comes down to everything works, and it's really your body. You can make tweaks here and there to optimize, but as long as you've got the right people around you and you're going hard enough, it all works. Some stuff works a little bit better for this guy, some works a little bit better for this guy, but if you get a bunch of savages in the same room, it doesn't matter what they're doing. And I really learned that from Westside, getting there a little bit early a lot. And the guys would come in and just be like, "Hey, what are we going to do today?" And they would ask two or three of the guys, and finally one of the Cambridge bar, "Good morning." They go set it up and they go. They didn't plan that much ahead. They just knew as long as they went hard and they stuck to their template, it would work. So I get a lot from that. I'm big. I have my station where I'm working in the gym right in the center. That way I can see everything all the time, and I just watch. I'm an eyeball guy more so than a book guy. I see, I see the majority of the kids have this one problem. I know I got to go tweak that in the program, and that's really how I try to do it. And that's why it's constantly changing. Maybe we ran certain lifts for a few weeks and everybody improved that one problem I was worried about. It's time to get something new, find a new problem to fix. So my program is basically a constant evolution of just what I'm seeing day to day. Um, you can ask much more specific, whatever. I was just kind of giving you the way I see things.
You kind of talked about the weaknesses and then some of the mistakes that people don't really tell you about their training programs. They always give you the great side of them.
Oh,
But
you're always getting the good stuff.
but the mistakes, I think, is maybe where you learn the most. Have you learned more from your mistakes than your achievements, or does it work opposite for you?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I went through powerlifting trying to brain through it more so than body through it because of I won't even say genetic limitations, just my limitations, personality, lifestyle, etc. But I've basically tore everything on me. I stayed hurt all the time, so that is when you learn. And, I'd pop a pec, so I would run up my shoulder presses, and just like that. But you just it makes you look at things with a different perspective, and you do that enough, and you get a good view of everything around, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can look back on some of my biggest mistakes and I'd learn way more from them than a day that everything went right in the gym.
Yep. I mean, down to the little details. Like I went a whole year, I popped my pecs like twice each, and we got to look and the ground just wasn't level on the benches. So I mean, you learn to look at the little details and make sure everything is just perfect. And set it up just right, and then just let it go.
Now, when you're building a program, how do you establish the main lifts? I mean, are you looking at just the main three? Are you looking like squat, bench press, deadlift? I know you do a little bit cleans. How are you establishing what you're going to program in that cycle for your main lifts?
A lot of times it depends on the season of what kind of athlete I do have. Because the kids are so busy. Like we don't keep a lot of kids in season because football practice is 4 hours after school, baseball's 5 hours after school. Couldn't get a lot of that, so I pay attention to who we have in front of us at the time. But up until probably 2 years ago, I ran it squat, bench, deadlift. Um, but even with our mobility and stuff, I wasn't getting the movement I wanted from my kids. We were still a little bit too stiff, a. So I've actually went to front squats instead of back squats. It's an easier time. With our volume too, I have an easier time getting kids in here in front squat in day one. You don't have to worry about many mobility problems up front. I've got 50 pairs of squat shoes. They throw those squat shoes on. We can have them front squat in 5-10 minutes. No big deal. We use close grip bench instead of a normal powerlifting style bench. Just you sports are in here, they're not out here. It probably doesn't really matter. It's just a little bit more specific, so we went that way. We do cleans instead of deadlifts. Now, going into football season and stuff, I do have you know, my my football players, contact sport kids. We will deadlift some heavy. We'll run it up, and usually one cycle of that, we'll get extra 50 pounds on their maxes. We're good. They're ready for impact. Um, and then on our other lower body day, we do full body, but the other day we do a main lower body lift. I'll generally use a unilateral exercise, like a lunge, a split squat, something like that. And every now and then, I pay attention to the kids. If they get bored, I'm going to change something. Because if they're bored, they're not trying. It doesn't matter how perfect the exercise is. You're not getting anything out of it because intent's so low. So every now and then they'll get bored. We'll throw some box squats in. We'll do band squats, something like that. But I reserve that for when we're bored, basically. So our main lifts would be front squat, close grip, cleans, and a unilateral.
Yeah, novelty goes a long ways with kids.
Absolutely.
I've been digging in the Bondarchuk system, and it's an amazing system, but you got to have the right minded athlete to take that out every cycle without getting bored.
And how many of them do you get of those? You get a percentage of those kids that are just robots. You give input, they give output. But the majority of kids, especially your younger ones that you're getting started out, they get bored. Lifting hasn't become their thing yet. Or, they're thinking of it as a second, third sport, which we accept we're a secondary sport compared to ball sports and everything like that. So this is not the first thing on their mind for most of them. This is just something they do to get better for other stuff. And once they're here long enough, a lot of kids, this becomes their thing. They get individual attention, they get individual awards and stuff. So a lot of kids really like getting into that too. But yeah, if they're bored, you're not getting anywhere.
I think a lot of times that's overlooked because we're adults and we know what's best for you as a kid, as a young athlete. So just do what we say and you'll be fine. Well, I mean, that doesn't always work, obviously.
Yeah, you've got to read the tea leaves. I mean, there's no point in doing something that they really don't want to do. I'd rather give them a suboptimal exercise that they'll give 100% on than the optimal exercise that I'm getting, 60% on.
Now, as I was getting ready for this, I found an article you wrote for Elite FTS, and I thought it was a really good article. I think it was called The Dollar Method, and you broke down the training and essentially big rocks, small rocks, and what you use money, your big money lifts, and then you just start piecing it down. So when you were writing that, how did you kind of assign a lift monetary value so that you could start establishing your big money lifts from your small change?
I wrote that a long time ago. Really just, I think of everything as in taxes. The rich get rich because they know how to work the tax system. So the gains get better once you learn how to get that big kit without paying all the tax on it. So different exercises are going to have different levels of tax on them. If we're doing 90% back squats or deadlifts, that's very taxing. But on the other side of that, we can run up 90% cleans, and that's not nearly as taxing because the eccentric is much lower. The eccentric force is much lower. So, I mean, if you wanted to put a definition on it, you could probably look at the eccentric loading on things for your tax because that's where you're going to get sore from. Um, but also you have to look person to person and how strong they are. So, say you have a 500-pound bencher, they're digging a big hole no matter what they do with bench training if they're doing something decently effective. Well, if I get a 100-pound girl in here and we do the same work, we even do double the amount of work, she still hasn't dug nearly as big of a hole. So her tax rate is very low. His tax rate is very high. So you got to look at the difference there. So I wouldn't write a list down and say this is this. And it's going to depend much more person to person what's so taxing because, I mean, you can make anything taxing, you make anything much more or less taxing. It depends on your parameters, your tempos, your frequencies, everything else. Um, like I even find the front squats to be much less taxing than the back squats. We're still going to the same intensities, but we're much less weight. You know, we're at 80, maybe 85% of a back squat max when we're front squat. So right there, you're getting very good stimulus while cutting the tax rate down by 15%, 20%. So I like to think of a lot of stuff like that. And now, like on our jumping side, when we're getting warmed up, our explosive side, hops, skips, stuff like that, that's essentially tax free. Like that's stuff they should be doing anyway. Um, my generation is probably the last one to really go outside and play. Well, if you look at how many jumps, hops, skips, steps that we took back then playing outside for 8 hours a day versus these kids sitting down, like that adds up. It's millions of steps over the course of their life up until they're with me. So I love throwing stuff like that in just to build up that free volume, kind of like you're never going to tax somebody so hard on a pogo that they can't recover for the next workout. Like we can do 200 pogos and come in the next day and do 200 more pogos. No big deal. Depth jumps, we might be able to do 20 and come in a few days and do a few more, but like that's very taxing. So you just got to look at the centric load, how often, frequency, intensity, and then just lift the lift.
That's a unique way to look at it, and I hadn't thought of it like that until you said that. But evaluating the eccentric side definitely could pay big dividends in the end.
Yeah, I mean, look how heavy the Chinese train Olympic lifting every single day. There's there's not much eccentric load they're able to. You get powerlifters. I mean, when I would get 700-800 pound deadlifters when I was training them, we got to where we could only probably deadlift heavy every third week. You add in the static start, that's much harder, obviously, but just you pay attention to the centric loading. I always had my guys lower their deadlift slow, so we could get more stimulus out of it. So that might have been a little bit of it.
Now, are you looking for fast eccentrics, slow eccentrics? Are you undulating that? How are you evaluating how taxing the eccentrics are?
Well, like say we're going through an eccentric phase. I like triphase like LD. So we'll rotate phases if my kids are advanced enough at the time. Um, so we'll go through eccentrics, which I dumb it down a lot because of the volume and the age. So we'll just say we'll have 5 second negative front squats. That's very taxing. So I have to pull the volume back a little bit. I'll use an adjustment scale. We'll, depending on the eccentrics and everything, we'll pull it back 5-10% just to compensate. Because I just run one max. I get the front squat max and I run everything off there and I'll run adjustments based off of what kind of tempo or pause or whatever else we're doing. So eccentrics are obviously harder. Pauses, not as bad. And then you get into the concentric phases and you're usually peaking during that. So you're kind of tapering the volume a little bit anyway. But I find the concentric only stuff, like you can really run the volume up if you just want some extra work in a different phase of however you're running it. But yeah, 5 second negatives is about as long as we'll take our negatives. Um, and I'll tell you, speaking of that, before I forget, the number one jump exercise we do is a 5 second negative trap bar deadlift from the top. I'll have them walk it back, do a 5 second negative down as heavy as we can go pretty much. I don't like to max deadlift, so I'll get a 3 rep max on that and we'll work right under that for a few sets or just slow negative trap bar touch and goes. And I've seen 6, 8 inch vertical increases in a month on those. And actually, there's probably one article that ever mentioned this, and that's just not the way my brain works. I read an article about Benedict Madison's deadlift training, and he used something called the JET method.
Okay, you cut out just a little bit. What book did or article did you read?
I couldn't even tell you what it was. It was Benedict Madison's training cycle for his deadlift going into that 1015 pull he did. And he used something called, he did it in a 3 week rotation, but he used something called the JET method. And I've never seen it anywhere else, but he would essentially do a rack, a very high rack pull just to get the bar. His training partners would pull the pins out and he would do negatives. He would do a really slow negative on his first rep, and the second rep was just a speed rep. So it kind of primed it and then sped it up. So I kind of adapted that with what little information I had on that and just kind of tried to figure it out. But it sent our jumps through the roof. So that might be something for everybody else to try out. I've told a few buddies, they've all tried it and they've had amazing results with that. But I do think with the younger generation, at least, I don't work with too many older athletes, but the centric phase is the most important for them. They need that braking force. They need to be able to stop. They need to be able to control. So we build those up. I run a lot more centric cycles than anything.
Moving on just a little bit, encompassing the whole strength curve and the velocities. How much are you watching the eccentric velocities and the concentric velocities?
Um, I don't I don't watch the eccentric velocities too much. I've only got 3 10 units, so I put those on the big boy racks. Um, but I'll have their training partners count it for them. So it's going to be slow. It's going to be 5 seconds, 3 seconds. So they're counting that for them. So we keep that a pretty good constant. After a week or so, even the younger kids can figure out how to lower under 5 seconds. Now I do watch a lot of the kids concentric velocities, and we'll waive that if we're in that kind of phase. And I'll waive that like you would waive speed percentages in powerlifting. Instead of, your 40s, 50s, 60s, I'm watching velocities for maybe the cycle might be a point 0.6, 0.7, point 0.8, might be a point 0.6, point 0.8, or 1.0. Just depending on what I'm seeing, how fast the kids are already, what we need. Like I said, I play a lot of things by ear and by eye, and just what I'm watching. And I might assign, different goal velocities depending on who it is. There's some kids that can out of the box move at a 1, and there's some kids that you got to coach them for a few months to get a point 0.6. And it's just them learning how to use what they have. But yeah, that's how I do that. I just eyeball it a lot.
Now, I think me and you had this conversation early on when we were getting this set up, but your young guys, you're running percentages, and your older guys, you're
Yeah.
running velocities. Is that correct?
Yep. Especially with my 12-year-olds, my 13-year-olds, my 14-year-olds, kids that don't have as much experience. I don't, there's better ways to do it if you're going to be completely optimal, obviously. But, I can't control, with the big boys, we have a little bit more control. They have their routine established a little bit better. They've already figured out how they need to eat. They know they need to sleep and stuff. The younger ones, not so much. Um, so you can't control all those variables, and they're too early into it to use an RPE. So we just go with the tried and true percentages. They might have an up day or down day, and I'll adjust on the fly just watching them. But given the power in their hands, they're not ready for that. So my bigger kids, my kids over there squatting 405 front squats for reps and stuff. Like I can put the Tendo units on there, give them a number, set it, forget it. I'll check on them. My younger kids, I'm going to have to be in front of them a lot more. So I'm just eyeballing it. Every morning I come in and I print an Excel sheet off and I leave some spaces before and after their numbers. And just what I see, I make little adjustments all day long. And then I'll update them on my Excel sheet. The next week, we might make another adjustment, but it's just the way we found that works for us.
I had thought about your idea on this quite a bit, and what kind of maybe jumped out to me was that could be effective because your younger lifters aren't selling out the lift for the speed. So if you're using if you're using percentages, they don't know what the speed is. They're just learning how to move the weight correctly. Do you find that, or
your more adaptable kids learn how to game the system a little bit faster? But those are generally the kids that get good fast enough to move up, and I put them on 10W units. The younger ones, I'm looking to get them into a safe position, build positions more so than I am worried about how fast we're moving stuff. It doesn't really matter how fast you're moving 135 pounds. You get up in the 4s and 5s, yeah, it's going to matter because we don't need to push that strength as much as we do the speed. If you're weak, you're weak. You're not going to be fast anyway. We have to get stronger before that matters.
Yeah, because I noticed that, if you start pushing a kid to go too fast, that point of the lift where you make that change of direction, they'll really hit that loose. They won't stay primed. They won't stay primed. They won't, so then their acceleration dies off. They may hit a high velocity at the end of the lift, but not at that reversal point where you really want them to be strong. It's how I think I see it.
You ask for too much too early and it's going to get sloppy. Plain and simple. And it's just not worth the trade-off for them to move that bar fast if it looks like a limp noodle coming up,
You've battled a lot of injuries yourself. So how has that helped you when you're evaluating movement in athletes, or you see what's coming down the road with weaknesses? How are you able to adapt and get that athlete in the direction they need to be?
It's just really has taught me my reads, what I'm looking for. It's an internet fad these days, but the feet. If I can tell what's going on with the hips and knees based off the feet. So I'm looking around. We work out barefoot. The kids come in, and as soon as they get here, they take their shoes off. They're barefoot all the time. So one of my main things is just watching how they walk. If they're on the inside of their feet all the time, we do have an injury risk down the road. We keep pushing that without fixing that. You can just tell everything from the feet. And we try to fix things before it's a problem. So the way I build my mobility and warm up and stuff is building around the feet, the knees, the hips, joints and stuff, and getting them lined up and just moving right. So most of the time, though, if I can get that kid's foot to pick up, the arch to pick up, we have no problems. We've never had any significant injuries in the gym other than, little stuff that anybody's going to get. But just really, it's just keeping eyeballs on kids and making sure they're doing things right. I think a lot of the stuff is a lot of the injuries you see in different strength conditioning gyms is just there's not enough eyeballs on them, and the client has a little bit too much control of how much weight they're doing. And they let the egos get the best of them and just start trying to run stuff up, and you can't allow that to happen till a certain point in their training career. My big boys will have a little bit more, and my strong girls will have a little bit more leeway. They know they can up and down a little bit. But my kids, my younger ones, are doing what I tell them to put on the bar, and I don't even tell them weights. I'll tell them what plates to put on, so they're not thinking about it. You ask half the kids in my gym, they don't know what they did yesterday, weight-wise, because I told them the plates to put on there, just to keep it out of their heads. And I try to minimize ego that way, too. If two 12-year-olds don't know what they front squatted, they can't give each other crap about it. So, and that's what I see in a lot of the high school gyms. It's just kids going back and forth with each other. One's ego is big, one's ego big. They just start putting plates on bars, and that's how you get hurt.
Yeah, it's tough to build a culture where kids don't miss weights and they're picking their percentages right, and you have to be on top of that all the time, or you're missing
Mm-hmm.
weights all the time.
Yep. And we even the kids. A lot of my kids are multi-year kids. They'll have 4, 5, 6, 7 year members. And once they're around so long, if I've turned this way talking to a kid and they see something over here, they'll fix it for me. So a big part of everything is the culture and the environment. Yeah,
Yes.
and that's actually how I get my employees because nobody in Eastern Kentucky is training for anything. Um, I hire kids that have been with me for multiple years. Their senior year after their main sport or once they go to college. That's who I hire because they've already been in my system. They know what I want, and most of them can read my mind after a few years, and they just go do it for me. That's a really big key for us.
That's what I found by accident is allowing the kids to coach each other and then build
Hmm.
up that culture. And then now all of a sudden you have a way tighter community.
Well, I mean, if you look at any of the martial arts, how do you get your black belt? You start teaching, you know. So it even helps them learn more as they're teaching because they have to figure out how to explain it to this kid. And then that gives them a little bit more perspective of what they're doing. And you keep building that knowledge base. I mean, how much better are you now after you started coaching than when you started? Not from the things you learned reading, but just by being there and coaching. You got a lot better. Even today, we had an 8 to 12 year old class, and some of my 13-year-olds just came by, brought their little sisters and stuff, and they were helping. So we start that early as possible.
And yeah, it builds a lot of confidence in the teachers. And then
Exactly.
and then the student, let's say, they don't feel like maybe you've singled them out or whatever, they've got a
Hmm.
peer, they've got somebody close to a peer that they admire and look up to help and correct them. And that makes a huge difference.
Well, how cool would it be to be that 13-year-old starting out and you have a state MVP over here coming to help you? Because we don't separate our ages in our classes. I've got 12-year-olds with 20-year-olds. Um, but that the kids really love that because it is a smaller place. You know everybody. If you play a sport, you know everybody that plays a sport. You watch everybody that plays a sport. So my young ones will come in and train beside, you know, the state champions, and the state champions are helping them. Well, that just gets them going even more. I want to be that guy now. So it's like a rub off effect. They get better, so they get better, so they get better.
It's like Tony Holler talks about the feedback loop. It just keeps creating a new monster all the time, and kids are getting better
Yep.
all the time.
There's certain kids that if I have them in the gym, the whole gym's elevated just because they're here. They see that guy doing an extra 12 inches on a jump that nobody else will even try. Well, somebody else is going to try it, and then somebody else is going to try it, and then next thing you know, you've got 20 kids that are able to do the same thing just because they saw that first kid do it. It's like Prefontaine breaking the 4 minute mile. Nobody had ever done it, and now there's thousands of people who have done it. You got to have somebody that'll break the barriers while everybody else is watching, and then the floodgates open up.
Now, this time of year, coaches are getting all their athletes and they're working pretty hard to get ready for the season. How do you assist your athletes with managing the stress from both places and keep them ready to be on the field? Because the volume gets pretty high if they're at practice for a couple hours or school mandated
Mm-hmm.
weights, and they still want to come to you. How do you balance that?
We play it by feel. Ask them how they feel every day. I talk to every kid that walks in here as they're coming in. And I just ask them how they feel. If they're ran down, we're going to pull some stuff back. We're going to get rid of some stuff. If right now it's dead period in Kentucky, so there's nothing going on. So like right now we can really push, but it's really just day to day how they feel. I don't pre-plan that. Now I know if there's games coming up or a track meet coming up, I'll have something different set up that's not very taxing. More of a primer day. Um, but other than that, just play by feel by eye. I know not everybody can do that, but that's just something I'm able to do. Just the way we have the whole system set up, which I built ground up, and that's how I build it. Um, I'm technological enough, but I'm not super technological, so I do it pen and paper, and I just ask them. We talk.
And that's the key, having a relationship with the kid that they could be honest with you and know that you're not going to hold it against them, that, hey, you really
Hmm.
are looking out for the best interests of them and their career.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're watching people, we got plenty of the overachievers that are never going to tell you they're tired. Well, their faces don't lie. Their mouth might, but you can look at their face, you can look at how they're performing, and like, all right, we're going to cut 3 sets off today. Deal with it. And they get mad about it, but it's what's best for them.
Now, I went back and watched some Juggernaut roundtables that you were in with some other guys, and there was some stuff brought up in there that really, it really put a light bulb off on me. I understood this in horses, but in people, I didn't. So let's say you have a form issue with an athlete, and now
Hmm.
you're trying to correct their form. Well, if you take that, let's a brace or a crutch away from them, the muscles under that aren't developed to pick up the slack.
Hmm.
So understanding when you go to start fixing somebody's form that it could throw off the weight they're lifting, managing
Hmm.
that. I hadn't thought about that in people, but them new muscles that are doing the work are going to take more time to develop. So giving the athlete enough time to accommodate to that.
Hmm.
How do you make that work?
I mean, if we got a problem, we just pull maxes back. Most of the problem is just people won't adjust the numbers. Um, if I can't get somebody to move a certain way, we pull the numbers back until they can. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. You know, obviously it's going to be different with Olympian and you're peaking them and you're trying to make a small change. That takes a lot more. But with a 15-year-old, just pull the numbers back. And once it's fixed, take the numbers back up. The easiest way to fix form is just make it easy enough to do it right. So just a lot of things I'll give them a little ramp if they can't get all the way down on a squat or something, and I'll just tell them to step off that like a quarter of an inch a week. That's it. I try to make it as simple. With the volume I have, I have to make it simple. So something like that, or just pulling the numbers back a little bit and just finding that sweet spot that they can hold that form under that kind of load and then run it from there.
I think me and you maybe had talked a little bit about tempering, but
Hmm.
do you temper your athletes much?
We don't make a specific time for it, but I have a bunch of tempering rods laying out. If they need something, they'll grab a buddy that'll come do it. I've taught pretty much all of them, and they know which kids to ask to help them with it, or one of my workers or something. They all know what to do, and if they need it, they go get it. They're always laying out beside the warm up mat.
Since we've kind of incorporated this, I have a lot to learn. So by no means do I have it figured out, but it seems like tempering must release some endorphins or something. Have you noticed that they almost get addicted to it?
Of course, it's going to be addictive. You come in beat up and you row for 2 minutes and you stand up and you're walking on Cadillac suspension. Yeah, I've got a lot of football players that request me pack those heavy things out to the field on game nights.
It's just something I stumbled across. And the other thing I think that maybe I stumbled across is tempering slowly. You don't have to get it all out in one night. You know, you're going to see that kid again. So just work on it a little bit
Hmm.
and then come back at it the next day. And then it seems like it's a gradual growth into where all of a sudden they feel good and they don't even realize it.
Yeah. A lot of that you can speed it up if your rollers are heavier. I've got a 200 pounder for my big boys. If that doesn't fix in 2 minutes, like we probably need to go talk to a physical therapist. As simple as that. Or there's a bigger issue that we need to look into further. The diaphragm might not be working. That's usually the main problem with everybody. The foot's not working. But if those are good, you're just tight. If you've got a heavy enough roller, the problem's gone. Obviously we won't use the really heavy ones on our younger athletes, and that does take a little bit more time. But if the they can handle it, they're big enough and it's safe, the bigger the roller, the better.
Now I've heard you kind of say the same thing about mobility. It's just a slow growth. You're not trying to get them
Yeah.
mobile all at once. You're just letting them work
hmm
into it.
Yeah. Yeah, mobility is never going to happen super fast unless I'll take that back. If I can take the time and I have a kid that can concentrate enough and we go through the diaphragmatic breathing sequences from PRI, like I'll take kids that can't touch their knees and they touch their toes in a few minutes of that kind of work. You have to do that a few times to get a stick, obviously, but that's a fast track to mobility. You get your diaphragm stacked, you get your ribs where they're supposed to be, and you get the pelvis where it's supposed to be. You're flexible. Now, not everybody's ready for that. You're just mentally, they just can't get in the right spot for that. So yeah, I'll look and see what kind of mobility problems we have across the group. We'll add some mobility exercises for that. But I'm also going to come onto the other side of the program and add some strength in those spots. And that's a lot of what we do with our accessories. Um, if we're having tight hip flexors, we're going to do a little bit of glute activation on the warm up side. We're going to stretch those hip flexors. And then after everything else, we're going to come over here and maybe do ATG lunges just to reinforce that. And I think that's where a lot of people mess up on mobility is they're stretching one side really hard, but they never build the strength on the other side to keep it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's something I've looked at quite a bit. If you're hurting on the front, if you're hurting on the front side, and I think Matt Winning gets deep into this. If you're hurting on the front side, go to the back side, try to get that stronger, and then see how you feel.
hmm And not even front side, back side. It's just antagonist. Whatever is on the other side
Right.
is usually the problem.
Watching some of your videos, you're creating some kids with some pretty big vertical jumps. Yeah, I know you talked about the trap bar in there a little bit and how you work through that. What are some other things you're doing that really help kids increase that metric?
We just jump a lot. Really. Our low hops and skips and bounds and stuff. Well, we really run the volume up on that. That'll get up to 200 or 300 a week contacts. Um, and our bigger jumps, we will have, one main big jump at the end of the explosive side of things 3 times a week. That might be a depth jump, um, different kind of weighted jump, stuff like that. Or depending on the time of the year, we'll just run French contrast. And I really love when we can run French contrast because that's when stuff really starts flying. Um, but just building the right muscles, a standing vertical, which is our main jump metric that we use consistently weekly. You you build the right muscles, it goes up. And we give them constant exposure. We're on the jump mat. They know they come in Monday, they're going to be on the jump mat before the front squat. And we built a culture around that alone. I have a record board that we put, have middle school girl, middle school boy, all the way up. Um, and the kids just want that record. So I think a lot of it comes down to intent more so than anything. We have kids wanting to be on that record board, so they are going to try harder, harder, harder. So even on the jump stuff, like my wife runs that side. I make the program. She gets all the work done, but we don't even have to make adjustments to what they're doing too often because they do it. They want to jump higher because they want to get on that record board. And it's kind of a social status thing for us. Everybody knows who's the top dogs, and everybody wants to be the top dog. So they just try. It's intense.
Yeah, creating a culture of competition without attaining what you're trying to do,
Mm.
it sets the stage for a lot of growth.
Oh, that's where all growth comes from. I could, I could go print off a program from the internet and run it and get them to go hard enough. It's going to do pretty, maybe not as good, but it's going to do pretty damn good. Just it's intent. We put numbers on as many things as we can, timing gates. I've even got, we've got pocket radars up for when we do med ball throws, all that kind of stuff. The more numbers they see, the better they do. But you got to think this generation of kids, most of them play video games. So we could just call it XP. We're just getting our XP. They all want a higher number. So they see the number, they try harder, it goes up, they care more. And it's just a constant cycle. With our jumps, big thing, I sit there and I write down every PR they get. I'll make an Excel sheet with everybody's name on it and their PR, and I'll leave like 10 blank spaces beside of it. And literally, I'll write down a .1 PR because each one of them matters. They add up. So some kids, they're the kids that are going to go up .2, .5, .1 each week. It adds up. And then a lot of times you'll have kids solve and all of a sudden hit a 4-inch PR. But I want to make sure they know that number in their head because that's what they're always trying to beat.
And that's what Jared Bidney talked about a little bit. He gets as accurate of a measurement device as he can because that .1 makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. You just have to have a few of those add up on the inch. And do that long enough, you've got a lot of inches.
Yeah, and that's all it is, right? It's just a matter of tracking growth. It doesn't matter how much the growth is. It's just over the long haul, what were you able to accomplish?
Yeah, one of my older clients in the morning, he said something that stuck with me. He said it's better to save a penny every day than a dollar when you can. And that's just stuck with me. So that's kind of something I think about there. Like we'll add up the .1s all day.
I think that gets taken for granted a lot, but yeah, the big jumps don't come just because the little jumps weren't there. It's not a miracle when a big jump happens. It was the little stuff setting the building.
No, you see it coming. Yeah, I can look at my PR sheet and have somebody's progression. You know when it's coming.
Now, are you tracking ground contact times as well, or just their vertical jumps?
I do set up ground contact times on the warm up side. I don't track that as much, but they generally remember those. It's pretty simple numbers. It's .1s to .15s, something like that. So the range isn't going to be nearly as big. They're not 33.6s. They're not 40.9s. It's a .11. It's .12. So I don't keep up with those as much. On Thursdays right now, I've rotated in RSI jumps, and I'll take the average of their best 5, and I will write those down. I really like those a lot. I was doing approach jumps, and I'll cycle through. Our standing vertical is always going to be Monday, and the Thursday I'll rotate that around a little bit. We were doing approach jumps. I give them 2 steps, come in, get that, and I write those down, and I keep those logged. And then our RSIs, if they get a PR, I write it down. So I just keep a big list right on my desk, right in the middle of the gym. As they do it, I write it down. And before we go, I'll tell everybody what the PR is so they know what to shoot for. And then, if we have a really good one, like I had a 4.91 the other day. So I pulled all the kids over there and I showed them his average ground contact time, his average vertical height, and everything on there so they get a better understanding of it. And if we have a really bad one or somebody's really off, I'll pull them over there and I'll show them, like, your contact time on this was .2 and your vertical was 14 on it. That's why you did that. Get that down to a .15, get that up to a 16. You go up a few points. So I try to break it down like that too, but we just keep everything right down, make sure they always have it in their head. And if I really want something to go up, I'll race the spot on the record board and put it on there, and they want to start filling it out.
Ballistic strength versus speed strength in the velocity curve. Will you try to balance that out, especially for your younger guys that might need to be faster? So getting down into that 30 to 50% range, or do you want to stay up in that 70 to 80% range?
It comes down to how long the kid's been in the gym. Um, we're not going to worry about the differences too much in a first year kid versus a 4 or 5 year kid. Once they have all the basic qualities, then we'll start getting into the more complex qualities like that. Um, I'm not worried about how fast the kid can move in any type of way until we're squatting, at least body weight, plus one body weight, point one or 1.5 and twos and stuff. That's the higher you get up on that, the more you're going to pay attention to it. I'm not worried about how fast the kid that's moving point 0.7 times his body weight on the front squat. It doesn't matter. Just get strong. Like I said, once we're not worried so much about pushing that max on up, we've got the strength. You can front squat 2 times your body weight. Like you're strong enough to play high school sports and destroy everybody. Most cases. So at that point, I'll start paying more attention to how fast we're moving things. What kind of qualities we have, like going into the lift. The really good kids will, I'll even watch how much slack they can produce and get that rubber band effect. But like I said, if you're not strong enough, it doesn't matter.
We'd brought him up earlier, but me and you were talking as we were preparing for this. Another thing we were talking about, and Brandon Lilly wrote the cube in your apartment. So I was curious as to how
Yeah.
that all kind of shook out.
This was in college. So it was just a bunch of bros sitting around, and he got the idea to write the book, and we would just go back and forth with it, sitting there eating Dominoes, and I'd be like, instead of the original cube was going to be a strength day, speed day accessory, or a speed week, a strength week, accessory week, because that's how I don't know if you know, but West Side AM and PM they train completely different. So this is probably the root idea probably came from Bob Coe, the PM, more so the PM coach, Louis being the AM coach. So this was a deadlift cycle they were actually running, which would be strength, speed, accessories. Well, they've got good deadlifters, but they don't have the best deadlifters. Who are the best deadlifters in the world? Strongmen. You're not even in the club in strongman unless you're pulling 900. If you pull 900 in powerlifting, like you're a god. So I've been watching those guys a lot. I was like, we need to put more of a rep day in there. I mean, and even from high intermediate down, like you need the hypertrophy work. So we just spit ideas back and forth and just figured out a system, tried it out, trained some people with it, and then he wrote it. And Chad Juggernaut got it all made up, and it was released to the world.
That's a pretty cool story because I got the program out in the gym and I remember reading through it. And man, there's just some really good ideas in there, and it fits so well, you know, with high school kids because
Mhm.
you can program a day in where they can do the fun stuff that you normally don't program in the
Yep.
curls, all the different things, and it's you know in a weird way it resembles 5-3-1. You're just mixing your weeks all up, and
hmm
and so it's a really cool program. So to be there when it was wrote, I'd imagine that was pretty cool.
And there's so many, like, don't look at it so much as a program. Look at it as a template that you can apply other templates to. Like I've ran a cube, a triphasic cube. I've ran like 5-3-1 cubes. Like you can kind of intermix those. You're basically it's a um just a way to just cycle things and keep you a little bit fresher. But it you can apply a lot of different other ideas to it. It's the base recipe that you add some extra spices to.
You went from lifting in the garage, just you and a few guys, to this massive facility full of kids. How did that slowly progress? I mean, you just didn't go from the garage and buy something. You had to build up into it. How many years did it take
Well,
to build this?
I'd actually in college with the cube, I started taking the clients that Brandon couldn't handle. He's just overloaded. So I started training them online. And I was already training some people with my ideas. Um, I took my girlfriend from never lifting 2 years. She got a world record for the squat. She was the first girl to squat over 400 in any class, 132 or under. Um, did powerlifting for a long time. Actually moved home, and I was just at the gym one day, and that's when voodoo bands came out. Well, the lady was sitting there complaining about her knees. So I was like, "Why don't you let me just try this?" So I did that, and she hired me on the spot. Like I wasn't even training people in person, but she hired me on the spot. So I was a gym bum anyway, so I would sit there all day long and just help people for free. Like it is a small town, so everybody knows everybody anyway. So I would sit there like unsolicited advice was okay here. Like it's not everywhere, but I would just go help people, and people would start hiring me, and then they would tell their friends. So I was actually at a gym, and I just paid them rent for probably the first 10 years, and it was all adults. I hadn't even thought about kids yet, and then they started asking me to train their kids. And early on, I would take, just to get business, I would take the cases that nobody else could handle because I was still working with a lot of people one on one. Like I took guys with heart transplants. I took kids with like CP. Like I took the hard stuff. So I got a reputation just being able to do it. You know, you bring me a problem, I'll fix it. And that built up. And they started bringing me their kids. And I started training them for their sports and stuff. And I still train them as powerlifters. And it was working. You know, they all got better. But then I slowly kind of just I enjoyed it better. They're a lot easier to be around. They're a lot easier to work with. They're little sponges if they respect you enough to pay attention. So I just started liking that more and took more and more and more, and that got built up. And then COVID hit, shut down the gyms. I had no source of income. But I had been buying some equipment already just for the tax write-offs. Stuff I wanted for me, stuff the kids could use, and just tax write-offs. So I moved all that stuff in my garage and took some money I had saved up and bought a little bit more. And this was a 450 square foot garage, no AC. So even my adult clients followed me there. We kind of ran a speakeasy. It's a small town, so you get by with a little bit more here. So we just started training people in our garage during COVID. You know, we had no real bills. We was getting no stimulus checks like everybody. And we just saved up. And we were walking through town one day and this building had a for sale sign on it. I couldn't afford it, but I called the realtor. I knew her and just gave them a low ball offer because they'd been sitting here forever and they took it. And I had enough money saved up for the down payment and a little bit of upgrades just where we'd been training people through COVID and had no bills. You know, we weren't eating out and everything. So we just put all our money up. So I got in 10,000 square foot, like I said, and we had to completely remodel. And we did all that ourselves. Luckily, my wife's dad is, he's an old Marine that like will not quit a job until it's done. So we just came in here, busted our ass. We were putting 12-hour days in training clients, and then our off days we put 12-hour days in remodeling the place. So that process it was kind of rough. We were training kids on one side of the gym and had excavators running on the other side of the gym. You know, I had 10 tons of dirt over here while this kid was squatting over here. So and it just built up. Nobody had anything to do during COVID. So like if they could come for an hour and a half and have something to do, like that was the only thing they had. Like that was their mental health for the day. Um, so you get this kid and he does good, and then he brings some buddies, or the competitor sees him, he wants that edge too. So they just started coming, and once we got this place going and got it where it looked pretty good, just more and more came. And luckily it did because we built the whole gym just off the cash flow that we had from clients. Like I didn't have the money to buy 5, 6 squat racks, but trained some kids for a month or two, and then I could buy the squat racks. And then, more people came. I trained more. We could buy the turf. It just built up like that. It was a slow grind.
bless all the people that were there with you from the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They put up with an environment that wasn't near as nice as what it is now, but
no,
they were willing to stick it out.
yeah. Like I would tell the kids, don't wear white t-shirts because you're going to be dirty. And luckily, I had a lot of kids that had been with me for a long time already at that point, and they came in here and volunteered and worked their asses off for me for free. I wish I could have paid them, but I couldn't. But like just putting the gym mats in, I had 20 boys in here packing them in. There's 14,000 pounds of mats. They were in here packing them in as me and my father-in-law and my grandfather were over there cutting them and gluing them. So we had a very big. I saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in labor just from our community.
Well, people know a good thing, and they're more than happy to chip in when they know that the results are going to make the community better.
Yeah, yeah, and we're in a small town. It's probably a 5,000 person town. It, the way Eastern Kentucky works, you drive everywhere. Like nobody, not that many people live in town. Everybody lives out of town, drive in, but there's nothing for the kids. So people found out what I was doing for the kids, and we just got help. People just started coming and helping. And we had random like people we wouldn't know would walk in and just help us start cleaning places, just because it was something for the kids. And they're in Eastern Kentucky, if you're successful, you leave. Like once you go to college and everything, you don't come back. So that was another side of it. It was just me coming back and doing something. There's not too many 20, 30-year olds here, really trying to build. So we got a lot of support on that side and just from the kids that, I had already built relationships with and we just built it as a family, really.
Now, we talked about how you do this because you work through so many kids. I talked to a lot of high school coaches, and they work through a ton of kids. But in the private sector, you don't hear of guys working through as many kids as you do. So you kind of
hmm
almost have your gym set up like in stations. So you have your mobility and then your main, then your accessories as they come around the loop, I suppose. They're hitting a different
Yeah,
station.
I I set it up as a conveyor belt. We don't assign times. We have open scheduling. We'll right now it's summer, so the mornings we'll start a class every half hour. Evenings we start a class every hour. During the school year is every half hour. So I'll have as they come in, they'll have I'll have balance boards and stuff set out just so that they can do that, crank around before class starts. On the half hour, I've got somebody that does the mobility. That's their whole job. And that makes it simple to hire lesser trained people for the job because I can give them, three, four exercises. That's all you have to know. You have this read, this read, this read, make sure it's good. We're good. They don't have to build a whole system. They don't have to remember the whole thing, keep up with everything. So we'll have somebody on the mobility warm up station. I'll have somebody on the explosive station. I've always got the heaviest lift of the day, whether that's front squats, cleans, etc. The risky stuff. And then I'll have somebody on our secondary barbell lift, which is usually going to be a the bench or chin ups or something like that. And then I'll have somebody over accessories, and they have two or three lifts that they pay attention to, and that's it. If we're real busy, I'll just depending on the year, I'll have two people working accessories, so that gets bunched up a little bit. And then I just watch the flow of things. Whatever we're getting bunched up on, I either need more equipment or more workers. So, that's just throw money at it, the problem solves. Um, so that's just how we run things. So we don't limit classes to an hour. It's however long it takes. Um, but I'll have one group of kids that started an hour ago over here. We got a new class coming in. Um, and it might not work for everybody, but it works for us.
Now, you kind of touched on it a little bit there a minute ago. I don't know much about Eastern Kentucky. I've worked down south and back east just a little bit, and you work around guys that are from there, but it almost seemed to me like there's a race to get out,
Oh yeah.
and move on to greener pastures. So athletics are maybe an avenue that some of these kids can go chase some bigger dreams. So,
Absolutely. That's my goal, is to get them out.
and that's what I was wondering. So, are you just helping them with the weights, or are you helping them with the other stuff too? Are you helping them get their emails out for recruiting, or whatever you can do to help them find that next step to make it easier on them?
Yeah, it depends on the school, their coaches and stuff. Some coaches like to handle that. Um, so I won't cross lines when I don't need to cross lines. But kid needs a recommendation letter. He needs to get on the phone with somebody. I've got a kid wanting to go to the Naval Academy. Like, I'm going to get him in touch. I'll sit him down with a congressman. I'll do stuff like that. Um, as far as making their highlight videos and stuff, that's pretty much them. If if I've got a connection to a school they want to go to, I'll make sure the film gets there. But outside of that, now we'll have college recruiters. I'll let them come in and just watch. They're more than welcome to come in and see the training, see what they're doing. I even let any of the high school coaches that want to come down. I try to keep a really good relationship because they can make or break me. They cut me off and they can send kids to me. So I try to keep as best relationship with them as I can. So I let them come in and watch. I do whatever they need. You know, I you know being in a small place, you can build connections pretty easy. So if I can make a call and help a kid, I'm going to. But as far as like reaching out for them to recruit, I don't cross that line too much.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious because you just, when you're in the business like this, you seem to take on so much of a bigger role than just a strength guy. You know,
Oh
those,
yeah,
those kids are really looking at you for a lot more than what you ever anticipated in the beginning that they would.
yeah. I mean, I most of my nights are spent going to games after work or days off. They and even I'll get calls from parents like for some reason they want me to do the punishment for them or get on to them about their grades and stuff. So I've took kids and be like, you're not working out until this math homework's done, and I'll sit them over at my desk, and when they show me it's done, they start working out. So I mean, you're much more than a strength coach in this setting. You're a leader. And that's another thing I like to do. They're not as exposed to as much here, so I share all details of my business with them. You know, I go buy something, I explain why I buy it. You know, any kind of moves I make, I talk openly about them with income and the money and the taxes and everything, just to give them some exposure because there's not too many people, younger people that the kids are around running businesses, and they don't teach that stuff in school too much. So I'm an open book with them about that, and I just hope that a lot of them will listen, a lot of them go on and use it. So I just open book, even relationships with my wife. Like I talk to the kids about it and teach them how to have healthy relationships and stuff like that. So you're doing a lot of life coaching as well as strength coaching in this setting.
And that may be what brings them back more so than some of the other things that we think brings them back, but just having somebody that's pretty real with them. They they
Oh yeah,
they
I'm
know.
100% real with them, and I don't advertise, so it's all word of mouth business. So like I even have doctor referrals for anxiety, like kids with anxiety. The doctors will send them here just because they know we're real with them. We have a good environment and we're going to build them up. My big thing is we have to find small wins every day. If you're winning every day, confidence shoots to the roof. And that's if you can get a kid confident, they can do anything.
We had this discussion, and I thought this was pretty interesting, so I added this back in. I wasn't going to keep you all night, but I think this is a pretty unique idea. I don't know how to get around it, but and that's what we talked about. But summer fog, getting through the changing schedules, they have more time on their phone. Their whole world gets shaken up that last day of school. And you
Yeah.
brought it up, the summer fog. Have you found a way to battle that, or do you just kind of slowly work through it?
We call it the summer slide, and we usually don't have that the first half of the summer because there's still a lot of different sports practices. They still have some resemblance of a routine. But after dead period, other than the football kids that go into practice, they have nothing. they're just like floating around in the world for a few months. Um, I still haven't 100% nailed down how to fix it. Um, you know, I talk to them extensively. I'll ask them every day, like, what time did you go to bed? And in the morning, fail. 10, pass. Just be real with them. I tell them if it was good, if it was bad. I ask them what they eat. Um, you know, some of these girls come in, they've only had two Alanis for the day because they think that's where all the energy comes from. And they're going to get talked to about it. But, um, but really, I just start modifying the program knowing that their brains aren't going to be 100% there. I start pulling risk back because like I haven't figured out how to fix it. Maybe somebody has, but I haven't. So I just start pulling risk away. I'm just real about it. I know it's coming. I know we gotta adjust some things for it. Um, it, I'll, we'll start giving them a little bit more warm up. We might get on the bike first just to get some more blood flowing, get a little bit more oxygen going and stuff like that. And that does seem to help some, but it's an uphill battle.
It's a hard battle when they're in school, let alone when they're out of school.
They're just so much better when they're in school. They're on a routine. They know they have to go to bed by a certain time because they have to wake up early. They have to eat breakfast before they go, or they go to school and eat breakfast. They have lunch, whether they eat it there or they pack. They just have a routine. It might not be the best routine, but it's better than none. So I have a lot easier time in school than I do in summers. Um, now it's really, I try to talk to the parents too about just making them go to bed. Like we can almost get by with them eating half of what they should as long as they sleep. Um, as soon as they start playing video games till 5 in the morning, like there's no point in them being here. Like nothing is going to get done, and we're just going to slide backwards. Um, so, but you get the kids that care, and they start seeing that, and they'll start adjusting a little bit because they can't stand their numbers to go down. You get somebody in here that hasn't jumped a jump PR in 3 weeks, they start like it gets to them. So while everybody else is hitting PR, so they like the better ones will kind of self adjust a little bit. But I haven't found a definite answer to the problem.
I think if you could, you'd write a book and you wouldn't have to worry about anything else. You just sell that book.
I'd retire at that point.
Well, Coach, I've had you on here quite a while, and we'd met through a mutual friend, so I've been wanting to sit down and do this. And man, I really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
So yeah, if you do anything new or you get anything out there, let me know, and we'll do this again.
Anytime.
All right, Coach. Well, have a great evening.
All right, you too, buddy.
Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.